So I just saw something, and I think this is a very interesting thing because finally somebody said it. Somebody said it. It's from Yahoo Sport. It's from Hoops 360. I don't even know exactly what Hoops 360 is. But somebody in the media said it. They weren't scared to say it. They weren't scared to say it, lads. That is an important thing. It is Hoops 360 from... I'm trying to find what it is. It is actually something from Yahoo Sports. So it's Yahoo Sports themselves that had this, and some of the actual media is not scared to say it. Finally, let's take a listen.
What do you make of the idea of the conflict of interest between Napheesa Collier and Breanna Stewart and the interest of Unrivaled may not necessarily aligning with the interest of the W?
I think the biggest reason why it's a conflict of interest is that the WNBA want to have an exclusivity, want to put an exclusivity clause. And I personally believe, even if, I actually think right now, the WNBA are not paying their players enough money to have exclusivity. They're just not. $1 million a year max contract is not enough money to have exclusivity, especially when you're telling them to sit on their ass for 8 months a year. But that being said, I think even if they offer players $5 million a year, I don't know if they would allow exclusivity.
Well, Fee and Stewie are not only WNBA players. They are on the executive committee. So as is Kelsey Plum, she's playing in Unrivaled. 3 of the 7 people on that board who can now vote for a strike are part of Unrivaled. That is not necessarily a bad thing. I think the thing about conflict of interest, though, is just the simple fact that you as a person have interests that conflict with one another.
Like, it's the most common sense shit ever. It's like, nobody said they were the devil. Nobody said, by the way, that Stewie and Fee were negotiating maliciously. No one ever made that argument. But like, by default, there's a conflict of interest there. There is. By default.
Yeah. The key thing is just keeping in mind that is there. The facts of it are Fee and Stewie run this league that makes them money. There are players who played in the first season who have equity in the league who are able to make money off of this league, right? And that's the thing, is just to keep it in mind that these are two different things. If we want to go all the way back, like, players have been playing overseas the entirety of the WNBA. That is also a conflict of interest because, as we know, the schedules are...
Absolutely. The overseas is a conflict of interest. The fact that players overseas, if, for example, you're an Awafam who signed on for 3 more years for Valencia, who signed on to Valencia through 2029, if she was on the executive committee, there will be a conflict of interest because she is contractually obliged to play with Valencia till 2029.
Overlap. You have to...
And obviously the Malonga situation where she literally just tore up her contract and I'm pretty sure she's being sued. Malonga still hasn't had that resolved. She might not be allowed to play in the WNBA season.
Make decisions, all of these kinds of things. But to say that there's no conflict of interest is absolutely ridiculous, because there is.
Of course there is. You can say that you'll take your personal interest out of something, but we're all human, right? Like, these biases exist. You can't always totally and completely take maybe a personal interest out of something else. Is it a concern of yours, though?
It's always going to be a concern of mine, no matter what we're talking about.
I think it's, for me, I think it's the biggest concern is that we've lasted so long, and it's very hard to say I'm going to take my personal biases out of it when Napheesa Collier has clearly let her personal biases affect how she's talked about the commissioner during CBA negotiations. It's very clear that Napheesa Collier has already allowed her personal biases to shape the way she's talked about the CBA negotiations because she hates Kathy Engelbert. And by the way, rightfully so.
And I say this, like, obviously as a journalist, right? Like, this is kind of the number one thing. So I always am concerned that it becomes a part of it. You know, I would hope when you're talking about Stewie and Fee that they understand that as well and can compartmentalize that just like athletes do for anything. But it is certainly a part of these talks, and it cannot be overlooked.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was so funny, like, when you had Fee basically clap back at people on Twitter being like, oh, there's no conflict of interest. Of course there is. Of course there is. There always has been. There always will be. There's not only a conflict of interest with you. There's a conflict of interest with NECA, and the I'm blanking. NECA and Project B, Elizabeth Williams and Breanna Turner and Athletes Unlimited. And the fact is that there is, like, all these players have equity. It's not just that they have their players in their leagues. They have equity in their leagues. It is a absolutely obvious conflict of interest. WNBA can't afford to have a lock, obviously. Of course, a conflict, but WNBPA doesn't do anything about it. That's where the big problem is. And ironically, my favorite part about all this is that the WNBPA have done everything they can to not promote Caitlin Clark as the face, when Caitlin Clark is the one player who seemingly has no interest in playing in any other league. She couldn't care less about any other league. She literally just wants the WNBA. And if nothing else, the people negotiating on behalf of WNBA players should be the players that are just playing the WNBA. Or they should at least have a seat. There's not one person who's only playing the WNBA that has a seat on the executive committee. I know someone like a Caitlin or Aja, Sabrina probably don't really want to, but at least some of them should be there. The young players, there should be people representing them. To be fair, there might be, but still, it's one of those things where we finally have some form of journalists saying it because they're just scared. You're scared. Like, I know this for a fact that not know this for a fact. I say that. I don't know why I made that statement. I'm wrong with that. But from what I have heard, definitely not for a fact, Jesus. But from a very trustworthy source that I assume is correct, that if you're a WNBA journalist, you are scared to say the phrase, Caitlin Clark is better than Paige Bueckers. Like, you are actually scared to say that because that could lose you your job. Like, it is like the clutch mafia in the NBA. The UConn mafia run everything in women's basketball. And it is like one of those things where you can't say it in positive. And obviously, South Carolina is an exception. Age is an exception. You're allowed, if a player went to South Carolina. But then Aaliyah Boston. You are allowed shit on Aaliyah Boston as much as you want. But yeah, it's a mad L situation. It is a mad L situation here. But I do have to say, it's such an obvious thing. We've been saying since the middle of summer, it's delayed to come around. WNBA media in a nutshell. I mean, it's one of those things. Two of the very few media members actually mentioned it. It's kind of late. Everyone knew it at the time. They were just scared because Fee clapped back on Twitter, and journalists are scared to piss off a player who went to UConn. It's as simple as that. I'm not joking. It is as simple as that. Because you better believe, like, NECA, they were allowed to criticize NECA when NECA took the money that they think is from Saudi, when it turns out there's no Saudi money in Project B. So anyway, yeah, that is the video. I'll see you guys.